Hi, today we're going to paint Rockbridge Mill. This is a really neat mill and it's down in southeast Missouri. And if you're in that location, you might want to look it up sometime. There's a real nice restaurant there, and there's also a trout farm, so you can fish. And then they'll fix your fish and you can eat that for breakfast or lunch or dinner or whatever. So pretty neat place. Check it out. But we're going to paint it today. This is a 16 by 20 size canvas. And let me run through the brushes that you'll need to do that with. This is my background brush. It's a size 12 and a flat bristle. And then the smaller one is my small background brush, and it's a size 6. And then going to another bristle, here's my fan brush, and it's about a size 4. And again, it's a bristle brush. Don't use a synthetic one, they're too soft. And then for a flat to paint the building, this is my detail flat. It's about a size 8. And then you'll also need a liner, just a little number 1 or number 2 liner. And that's your brushes. And then let's talk about our paint. These are Martin F. Weber Permalba paints. And I like them because they're a creamy consistency. And I'll point out your colors. You can see what we have here. This is white, and this one is cad yellow medium, and we have raw sienna, Venetian red, your violet is ultramarine violet, we've got ultramarine blue, this one is Payne's gray, and we have a viridian, that's a green, and then the last one is raw umber, that's a dark brown. And you'll also need a little cup with some medium in it. This is liquid glaze. The container, I have a large container and it looks like this. It does come in smaller sizes, but this is a good painting medium. Your painting medium thins the paint and it also speeds the drying time, so you need that. And then you need a little container. I've got a little can over here that I have some odorless turp in, so you'll need that. And those are your supplies for the day. And then we're going to get started with our painting. Okay, we're going to start with our sky, and I brush mix my colors. And when you brush mix, you want to be careful about these colors that are very strong. So always start with whatever is the lightest color in the mix and then add your dark colors to it. So I'm going to start with white. So I'm just pulling out some white. And then I'll move it over here in the middle of my canvas. Whoops, there goes my yellow. Let me grab it real quick. It is running away from me. Okay, now back to it. Okay, this is white with a little bit of blue. And I'm taking the corner of the brush and just pulling out the blue a little bit so I can not get a whole lot of it. And then just flip-flop back and forth to kind of mix it into your white. You're looking for just a nice sky blue color that's going to show up as a nice color against your clouds. And I like to work just a touch of medium in there, so I'll pick up just a little bit of medium in the corner of the brush. And then hold your brush so the brush is vertical, kind of vertical, and come in and check your color. And if it's altogether too blue, you might just add a little bit more white. But your color is going to vary. You can have some of it bluer and some of it is not going to be so blue. That gives your sky a little variation of color, and that's really what we're looking for. Again, the pressure is kind of on the bottom corner a little bit more as I go. And I'll remix my color as I need it, and that way you get a little variation to the color too, because you usually don't mix it exactly the same. So we're coming on down, and there's a little dip down in here where we'll be going around our cloud areas, so don't paint your cloud areas, and there's this big tree here. You can put just a little bit of kind of scrubby paint in the tree, but in case, you know, you might want to leave some openings in the tree for the birds to fly through your trees. Want them to be solid, maybe. My trees usually end up getting pretty solid. Okay, as you're coming on across, continue to use quite a bit of paint, but you can get your color a little lighter. Over there, if you want to go a little lighter, just pick up a little more white with your blue, and that lightens it down. But I am going to leave some little unpainted areas for the clouds, if you can remember to kind of go around just some kind of a general shape that might look like a cloud in there, so that you're not making everything solid, because it's hard to get white clouds on top of blue paint that's wet, so I kind of leave some space for them. You want to put enough paint on that it looks like you painted it. If you have too little amount of paint, it looks like you just put it on and then wiped it all off. So make it look like you've got paint on there. Right in here is where I'm gonna come on over to the edge, and it's a little bit lighter, but if you get it too pale, it's hard to see your clouds against the blue, so we want a little contrast in there. So I'll probably put some clouds down low and maybe a little blue over here. Your clouds are going to come up over the blue anyway. They will grow. They're not, when we put our clouds in, we're not just going to color book them in. We're going to let them kind of soften out over the blue and pick up some of the blue, so they look natural. So clouds have a lot of blue in them, Probably something like this is enough blue. I think I've got it covered pretty well. So we'll stop there. And when you think you've got enough paint on your sky and got it covered, clean your brush. And I just dip into my turp and wipe it out good on my paper towel, because we'll be going to our white that has some yellow in it next, and if we still have a lot of blue in our brush, our clouds will turn green. So we don't want green clouds. That makes it seem like we have a tornado coming. Okay, I'm ready to put in some clouds, so my brush is cleaned. I turped it out and dried it out really well. When you turp these big brushes out, be sure and really dry them good, because they do tend to hold a lot of paint. And then I'm coming in with my white, hold it up here where you can see. I'm picking up some clean white where there's no blue in it, and then a tiny touch of the raw sienna. Just barely get in it, because that's strong, and then I flippy flop back and forth to kind of loosely mix it. So it's just an off-white is all we're looking for. Now be sure and use that dark yellow, not the cad yellow medium, because that's too bright. A little bit of that, and get plenty of it in your brush, and then again come in on the bottom corner. I'm going to start kind of at the top of my clouds. This is a little bouncy stroke, and you're going to overlap the blue a bit. If you pull a little blue down into your clouds, so much the better. These clouds do have blue in them. And come on over, I reloaded the brush, got a little more paint on it. When you're out of paint, pick up more. Don't keep painting with nothing in the brush. Nothing comes off the brush, so it's kind of wasted effort. You could add just a little speck of medium to this, just enough to moisten it a little bit so it'll move along. But see, I'm keeping that brush so I'm working on the bottom corner. You can turn it different ways, but keep on that bottom corner, and it creates kind of a rounded edge. And then down here, close to where the background trees are coming up, just be sure you've got some paint on the canvas. This could be light blue, or we can just make it a little bit more of the white in there. Now this over here is a tree, so don't think that's a cloud and paint it out. Paint the tree out. If that happens, we'll just take like the corner of a paper towel and wipe most of the paint off, so you're back to where you can correct your mistakes. Because we all make mistakes as we paint. It's just knowing how to fix them is the tricky thing. And everything can be fixed. I think everybody's sky is looking pretty good, so let's come on down to our background trees. Now I'm going to use my smaller brush here. This is the small background brush that we're going to go to. And when you paint trees with oil colors, we normally start with our dark values and then build up to the light. So we'll start with a really dark value, and then we'll put some mid-tones in, and then finally a little bit of lighter values. And that gives you a dark, medium, and light. And to make anything look like it has shape, it needs a dark, medium, and light. So starting with the dark, and the top of the trees is kind of along in here somewhere, and I've allowed some of my blue sky to kind of, you know, look like you can see that through the top of the trees, so they look a little more open. But then as you get down in here, it's going to be more solid. So I'm picking up a little bit of my dark values, and I'm going to go into the Payne's Gray and a little bit of the raw umber, and it's just going to have a black look. Actually, I might throw just a little touch of Viridian in there for good measure, but mostly it's just your two darkest colors, your Payne's Gray and your raw umber, and on your brush. And then I'm going to start kind of maybe in the middle of the trees, and again I'm kind of working on the bottom corner of the brush and giving it just a little scoot to the side, because I know we're going to put more paint on top of this base coat. I don't want this paint to be real thick, because then it's hard to get your other colors to stick. So although it's going to go in real dark, it's not going to be you know, put on real heavy. And I'm going to be careful as I go over here against the building. I don't want to lose my edge to my building, so I'm going to be real cautious over here and go right up to the edge of it. Kind of work with the flat of the brush, and then once you get away from the edge, I can come on and working on the side of the brush there, the bottom corner, kind of go back and forth and up and down, and you'll come up into the sky. And when we do our lighter colors, they're going to come up in there too, but try to kind of work for a silhouette look of tree foliage against the skyline. So you sure don't want it to stop in a straight, hard line. Think of it as being leaves and foliage and so forth, which it is, and give it this little light, airy look that you might imagine trees would have against your sky. It'll pick up a little bit of your light color that's in your sky and lighten it down too, which is fine. So just be sure and cover up all of the canvas if you can see your canvas, and try to get some trees taller and some of them shorter. So any line that you've got there is just subject to be moved, because we don't want to stop at any exact place. Some of this will be a little darker, maybe some a little lighter, but it's still, this is fairly dark, and then it's going to get darker. We're going to come down to the ground line, which is right there. That's that tracing line that you got on your pattern there. I'm kind of being a little scrubby with this, so again that paint isn't going on real thick and heavy. Raw umber, Payne's Gray. You can put a little bit of your ultramarine blue in it. That wouldn't hurt anything. It's all just kind of going to look dark. And it's coming down to that line. So right in here, kind of what I've done is what it's going to wind up looking like all the way across. Dark base coat. Different mediums work different. If you're working with acrylic or watercolor, you put your lighter, well, with watercolor you put your light tones in first and then add your medium and darks. And with acrylic you kind of start with a base coat of a mid-tone and then you add darks and lights. So everything works a little different. Okay, I'm coming on over to the other side now, and then we've got this big tree that's in this general area right here. Earlier I put just that little bit of blue sky in there. I'm going to cover most of it up. I'm going to try not to cover it all up, but I may. Seems like my brush just keeps going sometimes. But again, a little bit of medium, Payne's Gray, raw umber. You can have a touch of Viridian in there, that's okay. Just anything dark. And again, we're going to come right down to the edge of the building right there. So we've got that little straight edge. I want to come right down to it. So we'll forward on over there. And Now this is a great big tree back there, and it's going to have those loose outside edges just like we were doing at the top of the other trees. Want to get it nice and loose on its edges. We'll have highlights back there too, so we're on top of this, so they'll come out over the edges to some extent as well. So just some kind of an interesting shape. Try to think like a big round maple tree or something that has lots and lots of foliage. I point my brush to the outside edge when I want to make that little soft look. See, I'm pointing the brush at it and working on the side of the brush. It's a pat, but I'm scooting it just a little bit too. It's a scooty pat. Because if you just bounce up and down like that, you don't make much progress. So you have to give it a little bit of a scoot as you're working these colors along. This almost goes out of the picture, but not quite. And we're coming on down while we're doing this. We're coming on down. And we're going to go down to our ground line over here, which is that first line you come to. You can make a mark right there so you know where you're going to stop. And we keep coming on with our base coat. Challenge is going to be not to lose all of this base coat when we get to our medium and light tones. So again, you want this pretty dark. People go, oh, it looks too dark, it's too black, it's too dark. Well, you're going to lose most of that. So get it on there. This is your chance to have some dark values in your trees because everything else is built in on top of it. When you look at your color picture, you're seeing still yet some of that dark back in there, so we've got to get it on there to begin with, and then we'll try real hard not to cover it all up. Again, get right over against that building. If you can't get in there with a big brush, you can use a smaller brush to get right against your building if that seems easier. But my dark's going to go right down to that line. It's going to come in just like that. When you don't have much paint on the brush, that's when you get those nice little soft outside edges working for you pretty good. Okay, that should do pretty good for our base coat to start out our foliage. So that's that for now. Okay, now we've got our dark base coat on here, and at this point I'm going to go ahead and at least kind of clean the brush. It doesn't have to be real clean, but just in case you've got a whole lot of brown or something on it from the drawing, but I'm going to just dip it in the turp and clean it off fairly well. And now then, you're going to think about the direction of the light. If you look at your color picture, you can see like the bushes are lighter and the trees are lighter on the left side. So that means the light's coming from the left. So when we paint our foliage back here, we want to think of it kind of in groupings of foliage, where instead of painting individual leaves, which are too far away to really see. What you want to look for is just groups of foliage. And I'll do a little bit here, and you can see what I'm talking about. But first we need to talk about greens, because we're going to be mixing greens. You can mix green with a lot of different colors, but for this one I have used the ultramarine blue, which I'm going to take some of and put it there, and then take a little bit of cad yellow medium. Now anytime you mix any kind of blue and any kind of yellow together, you're going to get green, because yellow and blue make green. And if you want a really black, dark green, you want more blue in it. See, I could say this is going to be a darker value over here that's got a lot of blue. as I go across here, I'm kind of going to make a string of greens just to show you the mixes. And then you get more yellow. See, you get a lighter value of green. See, that makes a lighter green. And then way on over this way, you would pick up more yellow and some white. And you get light green. So all these different greens can be mixed with your ultramarine blue, your cad yellow medium, and perhaps some white for the lighter values. So those are the colors I'm going to be using in here. There's a few places I might even pick up a little bit of raw sienna. If you pick up raw sienna, it gives you a kind of an orangey green. You know, it's still kind of in the green category, but it's more of a kind of a rusty or an orangey green, but that looks pretty sometimes also in your greens. So what I'm going to do is start out, and I'm going to use this same brush. A lot of times I use a fan brush, and we may do a little with our fan also, but this particular grouping I used more of the same brush that we have been working with, your small background brush. I'm going to start with this value of green, where I've taken the blue and added just enough yellow to it to make it look green, a little bit of green. And I'm working on the bottom corner. Now watch me before you start out, because I'm thinking of the light coming from this way. And what I'm going to do is start building up an edge for a tree. So I'm tapping lightly on the corner of the brush, bottom corner. And I'm thinking of kind of a little round shape. See, I'm connecting my strokes, and then maybe I'll turn it and go this way a little bit and make it kind of uneven. And that would be an edge of your foliage that's catching the light. Here comes your light stream. See, it's coming here and then it's hitting this outside edge to the tree. And you'll notice I've connected the strokes around, and then here I'll just kind of lift up on the pressure and pat a little bit of that green kind of back in the dark foliage, but try not to just beat it to death to where you've lost all your dark. See, that gives you like a little edge of a bushy shape back there. And then I could pick up a little bit more, maybe some lighter green, and come up here to where my background is a little lighter. And again, I'm connecting the strokes, kind of work them in a little group area, and then just kind of soften them back into the shadows. But I'm not going to run it into this bush here. I'm going to let there be some dark values in between. See, that gives you a little, two little, or almost three little groupings of foliage there. Where your value is lighter at the top, where you've picked up your sky color, your highlight would be lighter. So it looks connected. So I'd put some light green up here against the lighter base coat and work it in. Now, so you can see how I'm working little groups of foliage. Don't take your brush and just start making dots all over your background. It won't look like trees at all. So you're kind of connecting these strokes, because we're working light against dark. See, kind of little curvy strokes where you're connecting, and then take this back side of that green and melt it down into your shadows. When I say melt it, it just means kind of blend it, you know, scooch it down in there, just pat it in there. See, so that's giving you some different shapes there for your trees. So see if that works for you. Okay, when you're going into your light colors, be careful. You are going to put some white in it, but you don't want to get so much white that it looks like it snowed on the tree. So you want it to go to a yellow green, and then it's going to look more like it should. You'll have the sunny look on the outside edges of your groupings of foliage. So you just kind of keep working and building up your lights, and you may have to go back and put a little more dark in sometimes. You know, you just sometimes don't get enough dark to begin with and have to add it. And I've got just a few touches of raw sienna back in the foliage. If you're looking at your color picture there, you'll see some little kind of rusty looking bits of leaves back in there, and that's the raw sienna. If you didn't get but just a touch, you can even add just a little touch of the not cad red, but the Venetian red to your raw sienna and dab a little of that around in there. That's pretty in there. Gives it maybe just a little hint of maybe real early fall if you've got some kind of rusty leaves in there. So, okay, that's one side. Now we'll come back and put a few little sticks and twigs in there after a while, later, and then it'll look more like trees than it does right now. But we can move on over to the other side. We've got this big tree, and then we have a little bit of the softer foliage like we've done here that's going to be on the right side of the mill and off in the distance a little more, so we can move over there next. Okay, so as I come over here on this side, I'm again going to go into my, excuse me, a little bit of my light greens. And this little grouping back here is further away than the big tree. The big tree's right behind the mill, pretty close to the mill. And all of this stuff back in here is more off in the distance. So we can have a little lighter values on that. And again, just get enough in there. It looks like there's some kind of light falling on your foliage. Same idea. Remember to kind of keep it a little bit of on the curvy, kind of like a backwards C kind of strokes without getting too C-shaped, but that's more the idea. You don't want to make towers out of it where it goes just up and down, because foliage tends to hang in clusters that look a little bit more rounded. You can see these kind of shapes on your foliage. If you're driving down the highway, look way far ahead in the distance when the light is hitting the trees, and you'll see these little edges of light or values on your groups of foliage. You can see that. One neat thing about learning to paint is you really learn to see. You learn to pick out colors and shapes that you have seen your whole life but never really noticed. And you start really looking for that, and that's kind of neat too. Okay, I think we've got enough foliage on our distant area here, so I'm going to come up to this big tree. And again, I'm going to start with my flat brush, and I'll come out to the outside edge and just tap in some of my greens. Start a little bit beyond the edge of the tree and then come down into the dark foliage, so that it's that fading into the dark that seems difficult for most people to do. They can put on the light and then they just go off and leave it, and it won't look like it belongs to the tree. You have to soften it at the base and let it look like it fades over into the shadows. That's the idea. So I'll get some more little light edges here, and then we'll come on down. Before I get too far, I'm going to show you how you can also use your fan brush rather than this brush, because I use both brushes a lot to get my foliage in. So let me demonstrate the fan brush, because it gives you a little different shape, and some people find it easier and some people like the other way. And so anyway, if you're going to use your fan, I'm picking up the paint and pushing it away from me. I'm going to pick up my blues. You might throw even a little bit of iridium in there, get your yellows, maybe a little touch of white. I'm looking for lighter greens. And then when I turn the brush over, the paint is on the top right corner of the brush. Now if you're left-handed, it would be the top left corner, but anyway, we're going to come in here with the paint, touch, kind of push up just a little bit. You're throwing the paint off the corner of the brush, and again I'm looking for that little kind of an umbrella shape, little rounded shape, and then I just tap lightly and fade it back down into the shadows again. See, that gives you a nice little grouping of foliage. Lighter on the outside edges. And you can come back and add more paint to the outside edge if you need to. And then just let it fade back into the shadows again. Every time you load it, push away from you and hold the brush. The handle's kind of up in the air, especially since I'm highlighting over here on the left side. Handle's kind of up in the air. And then when there's not so much paint on the brush, I can just tap over into the shadowy part. So it's not quite as light, but it still has some greens on it. I'm going to cover up most of that little hole. I usually end up losing most of my sky in there. Okay, that's pretty well got enough foliage, I think, on that side of the tree. Need just a little bit more highlight here. A little more yellow and some touch of white, and see you get a brighter highlight. And we're going to leave the tree. We're going to put some foliage or some limbs in it later, but we're going to leave that alone for right now. And we're going to move down and we're going to paint the ground behind the tree. So let's leave our tree alone. If it's not perfect, we'll come back to it later and make it more perfect. And let's move on down, and we're going to paint this little bit of grass that's down here toward the bottom. Okay, the top of this grass back here is a real light green. Look on your palette. I'm sure you've got some light greens there somewhere. And any of those light green mixes would be fine. If it doesn't look light enough, add some white to it. So you just have a nice light value of green back here, and go right under those trees. Kind of soften that line just a little. We're coming down. There's a little gravel bar down here at the bottom, and then there's a lot of shadows at the bottom that's going to get really dark. But your light green's going to go about there. And then the rest of this down to that line is going to be more Payne's Gray. Just pick up some Payne's Gray with your green still in the brush. And this is a shadow area, and we're just going to brush that in. Just, you can pat it in and then brush across, just soften it in. It's pretty dark right there. A lot of Payne's Gray. Kind of an angle, a little bit of an angle there on the shadows. And that is that little corner. That's all we're going to do there. Okay, moving over here to the right side, or the left side, I mean, of the canvas, let's also kind of do the same thing. That's real light green, kind of a lot of white in your mix, right under your trees back there. Just kind of swish it in. If you can soften that line even under the trees so it's not such a hard line, it would look a little better. And this color will come down almost to the dam. We're not seeing any of the water, the river that's above the dam. It's almost at our eye level, the top of the dam is. But there's a little bit of dark green. Actually, it's under those trees back there that we're seeing, and this will be just kind of patted in. Whatever value of kind of the darker greens you've got, you can pat that in down to the top of the line there. Kind of little short downward strokes. And we'll get that little bit of grass in there. That's pretty dark back there, really. I'm going to pick up just a little bit of raw umber, tiny little bit on the brush. Make it a little bit darker right there, on top of the green. Right along there.
There's areas.
Okay, there's a little bush that's right here at the edge of the canvas that just kind of keeps your eye from running straight out of the picture from that line right there. So we'll block our eye from running out with this little bush. So I'm going to put a little bit of dark value there. And then maybe just touch a little bit of light green in it. It doesn't amount to much of anything. It just looks like a little dark area right there that's bushy. And I think that's all we need to do right there. While we're in this area, after you got the bush in there, take your liner and thin the paint down with a little turp and pick up some raw umber. I think raw umber will be fine. And you can sit your hand down on the canvas if you need to. I usually just get back on my liner and kind of flick the paint up, but it's up to, whatever you're comfortable with. but make a few little tree trunks. These trees, actually it looks like some of the trees, you know, we're pulling up into the background, and it actually pulls some of those trees down a little closer to you. In which case you can take a small brush and kind of make this back line a little more uneven, like you're seeing the bottom of the trees, you know, just tap some of that color down just so it's kind of losing that straight line at the back in there. And just, these are little random trunks that pull down, and you know, just some of them can be a little group of trees and then skip an area. Over in here we're going to have a bush anyway, so we don't need them over there so far. So it looks like you've got trees that are actually coming down a little closer to you. And like I said, to get rid of the line, just take it like the bottom of your detail flat and just tap a little bit of that darker value or whatever's up there, just tap it on down. Don't lose all of your light though. We want to see that light through this. That opens it up, you know, you want to see some of that light little field back in there. Okay, and then we're going to be ready to move on down. Actually, we're probably going to block in this dam first and get that in. We should have done that at the beginning of the painting, actually, but we were too big a hurry to paint the sky, so we left it out. But it's okay, we'll do it now. So after you get your little tree trunks in there, and you may or may, well, let's go back to the trunks for a minute. You may or may not want to put a little bit of the trunk lines up in here. If your color of your trees is light enough, you might want to throw a few little sticks up into the foliage. But they're back there a ways, and you don't particularly have to have them. Sometimes I put just a little highlight. If dark trees don't show up, you can put some with some like light green or something that'll show up. But it's immaterial. It's not going to make or break the painting either way. But then, when you get that done, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to leave a little line, maybe just right there at the top of the dam unpainted. And then we're going to pull, this is Payne's Gray with maybe a touch of blue. You could have just a little bit of raw umber in there, but it should be more black than brown. We don't want it to be too brown. Actually, just Payne's Gray is fine. Let's just use Payne's Gray. And let's block it in. And this can be drying while we're painting other things. This water coming over the dam is going to be one of the last things we do, so it'll have some drying time. Again, scrub it in where it's kind of thin. You want it dark, but you don't want the paint thick. We're going to spill water over it before the day's done. Gray. Okay, after you're through with the trees, let's come on up and begin our mill, and we're going to start at the very top of it. Get your little flat sable. I'm using the detail flat, something with a fairly decent sharp edge. And I'm going to start right at the top with that roof edge, and that I'm picking up just a little bit of Payne's Gray and raw umber, and I'm working right on the chisel of the brush, kind of the bottom corner or the bottom side of the chisel. And we're going to paint this roof edge and just kind of scoot it in. Just again use this narrow side of the brush. A little bit of dark paint.
You've got a little jiggity joggity thing over here where you're seeing, almost seeing a little bit of the underneath or the other side of the building. There's a little line that comes down that's, I guess I'm gonna leave that unpainted for right now. Right there is the roof line. And then that little bit right underneath it is going to be just a little bit of Venetian red. I'm going to wipe the brush and pick up just a little touch of the red, or the red, and fill that in. It's a real dark area right there. It's kind of hard to see it. There is dark. See, you can set your hand down on your dry canvas there. That's going to help you to be steady. So you're going to get the roof edge in all around with Payne's Gray and a touch of raw umber, just a really dark mix. And you're coming down this little side right there. And then fill in under it with this straight Venetian red. Okay, the red color on the mill is going to be mostly Venetian red, but now I've thinned it with a little bit of my medium, and then once in a while I've even picked up a little bit of raw sienna in the color. So don't pick up your Venetian red and put it on real thick and dark, because we want a little more contrast than that in it. I've got just a little bit of medium. Now that's tricky too, because you don't want to get it too wet. But Venetian red with just a little touch of raw sienna is a good color. I put it in. I'm putting it in, and then the final little back and forth strokes are going across. This building has siding that's horizontal siding. And so I'm keeping it going kind of like this. Going across. When we get to the edges, you can kind of, I'm going to go around that little roof edge right there. I'll come back to that later. But anyway, it's Venetian red with just a little bit of medium, and once in a while a little touch of raw sienna. Big old red mill. Venetian red's a pretty good color for like barn red type colors. But when you add the raw sienna to it, now and then it lightens it up a little bit. I'm kind of working on the underneath side of the brush, so I'm not trying to make board lines or anything right now. I'm just following the direction of the board lines, which is back and forth, rather than up and down. And if the paint's a little thinner, sometimes it looks lighter. And then when the paint's thicker, it looks a little darker. And then sometimes I've got a little touch of raw sienna in it, but we'll get it on, and then, you know, if it looks like it's going sideways or something, we'll straighten it out before all is said and done. Go around your windows. It's a good idea to just kind of mark your red around your windows so you don't accidentally paint them out. And then when you come down, you've got this door, you've got the, looks like a tin roof or something over that. I'm just kind of making an outline so I know where I'm gonna go to where I won't paint out things I don't want to paint out. And down there. But if you keep this paint a little bit on the thin side and use a little bit of raw sienna once in a while with your red, you'll get more, it goes on easier, and then you get a little bit more variation in your color. So, because the old building has got kind of faded in places, so we don't want it to look too flat and all one color anyway. And there's a bush down there. We don't want to lose our bush. All of this building faces forward, but there is kind of a little board line, corner board line thing right there. There's a jog between these two buildings, and when you're painting it from this flat angle, it's hard to see it, but you'll see up here there's a little shadow. There's a, if you see it from the side, this line right here is the edge of a roof that actually juts out, and then it has this cast shadow underneath it, because this section sets back just a little, and it's right now the way we're painting at this angle, it looks flat, but it really isn't. This is, of course, it's all flat and looking forward, but there's a little jog, so this portion does set back just a little bit more. So you get some shadows in there. I've just continued on down and got most of the rest of this filled in on this one side. When you get it all pretty well done, you can come back with your brush and just kind of straighten up some of the lines. If you have some that's angling down at an odd angle, you can come in and still move them around while the paint's wet and get that effect. And whether or not you put actual board lines in this building is optional. As long as you have a few little streaks going across, that's all that it really needs. I came back and put a few definite board lines in it, but I don't know that it really needed to be there. When you're a distance back from the mill, you don't really see the board lines anyway, because they're not real prominent. So as long as you got some light and dark in there and some little streaks across, that's what we'll aim for right now. So this side, it looks pretty well done. So now you can. Okay, I've got this side pretty well blocked in, so we'll move over here. Leave a little that little roof edge line unpainted, and then I'm going to leave a little corner board there unpainted, just so I know where it is, and then we'll go ahead and fill this in. There's going to be a shadow that you can see on your picture under this little line right there under that little roof edge, but right now I'm going to not worry about the shadow and we'll just paint it all red. And then on top of the red, we'll come in and create the shadow with a little Payne's gray or something. So I'm going to go down the roof edge. And again, I'm just going to kind of go around these lines so I know where to stop and don't accidentally paint too much. And here's another place it's going to have a shadow over here against this little section here, but for right now I won't pay any attention to the shadow. Building goes fairly quickly. It's just a lot easier than painting trees. And this can be setting up a little bit while we take our lunch break. Little windows again to go around. Quite a few Missouri mills in the general area of this Rockbridge Mill. You can go on a mill tour if you want to see several mills. And we've done that. I've taken groups out. Some of the students, we've gone out and seen the mills. It's this one's probably about 90 miles from here, so it's a long drive. We've been down there and taken pictures, and we ate at the restaurant that's right behind the mill, right across, right behind over there from this angle of the mill. And to get to this side of the mill to take the picture of it here, I had to wade across the river, but it was shallow enough I could get across. But it was cold. Okay, we've got our building blocked in with the red tones, and so take your little detail flat brush, and this is, I just want to indicate a corner board here. A little bit of white with your red should be light enough to show up, and just kind of get on the edge of your brush and go just to the inside, just barely to the inside of the red. And we really don't want this to look white, it's just going to look lighter in value. You can have just a little touch of medium in it. So you kind of indicate that little corner board right there, and then I'm going to come over here in this center portion and do the same thing right here. So it comes out kind of a lighter pinky red almost, so it'll show up a bit. Sometimes I put those little corner boards on and we'll come just to the inside with just a little touch of something dark, like a little bit of your raw umber or something, just make a little tiny line there. And be sure you have a good sharp chisel edge on your brush. Your brushes get all fuzzy, it's hard to do detail with them. Time to get another brush. So just that little tiny suggestion of a dark line right there. I'm not going to put it over there. I think that's good enough without it. But just a tiny little line. Sometimes you have to kind of straighten up from the outside edge too if your line's got a little wiggly, which happens real easily. So we've got those areas that are in those little corner board things. And then we're going to come up here in this white area that we left unpainted. There's more little board line edges there. That little bit that's up there above the dark line that I'm doing now was, as I said, a little bit of the other side of the wall that you just barely get a little glimpse of. And then the rest of this is just filling in those little roof edges. Paint's gray, raw umber, a little bit of medium, just enough so the paint will move. Stay right on that chisel edge. Now over here on this side, where I'm at here on your right side, if you run into the tree color, background color with the dark, that's okay. We're going to have a little light edge on top of the dark, just so it'll pull it away from the background. Trying to cover up all that little bit of canvas that doesn't want to cover up. Sometimes if you get your paint a little wetter, it'll usually cover up those little rough places in the canvas. The weave of the canvas material sometimes throws your paint off just a little bit. When you get that in, there's a little white, it could be white edge that's just kind of on top of that. You might have to do that with a liner. I'm not sure what's going to stick for you. The liner might be better. There's just a little white edge right on top of the dark, like, because this is like a little sticking out roof. It just doesn't look like it because you're looking so straight in for it, to it. But it's light right there on that top edge. And then on this one here, it's almost like I'm putting a little white right almost in the middle of it. And the liner probably does work the best. Don't thin the paint for this. I don't think it needs to be thin. Just stick your liner right in the white paint and then just let it drag along. Kind of on the top of the dark. Over here it's kind of on the top edge of the dark. And that helps pull that away from your background trees. It's a little highlight on the roof edge. After you've got your roof highlighted up there, let's try these little shadows. There's one that's kind of coming down here, coming down yay far, over here maybe, and all you want to do is just darken the red with just a little bit of Payne's gray in your brush, and this won't be thick paint, it's just a little bit. Your red just needs a little grayer look there so it looks like it's a shadow. So that's going to go in there just like that. And then you've got another shadow. This is actually almost darker if anything. It goes right under that little bit and right there. It's just kind of back in there like that. These shadows hopefully will make this look like it's kind of another pushed back layer, which it is, a wall. Anyway, those two areas are where your shadows are. Shadows are easier put on after the base coat is totally dry, and then you can just wash them on with little thin paint. But when you're trying to get a painting done in a day, like we are here, you don't have time for it to dry. But sometimes people will take them home and say, yes, I'm going to glaze that shadow in after it's dry. And as long as they don't forget to do it, then it's okay.
Sure you will.
When you're up here with your dark and the brush, you might as well paint these windows. They're just beginning with Payne's gray, or Payne's gray with a touch of raw umber is fine. And we've got 5 windows, and we'll just do them all at once. They're almost the width of the brush. Pretty close to it. The dark window set against the red wall begins to give it more shape, a little more contrast, makes it start looking more detailed and start coming together. The frames around the windows don't amount to a whole lot, but I'm doing them with a liner. Sometimes people choose to do them with a chisel edge of a brush, and if they can do that, that's perfectly fine too. But they're kind of a gray-white window, so I picked up a little bit of white, just a little touch of Payne's gray in it, and window gets kind of crooked. So I come in just almost kind of straddling the dark and the light. I put a little frame around there. While the gray white's still in your brush, I've got, I made these pretty simple, just a little one line across through the middle, divided up into 2 paint lines. That's enough paint lines. And be sure and have just a little bit of either medium or terp in your brush when you do this little line work stuff. Comes off of the brush a lot easier. So they're kind of little grayish frames. Sometimes it's good to put just a little touch of dark on the outside of the frame or under the frame. On this one, I put it on the left side and underneath. Just a little shadow with your red umber under there. On the wall, and then maybe a little bit of a shadow on the left side of the frame. Just a little. So So it's white with just a little bit of gray. And they don't have to be perfect. Just get them in there as good as you can. They're old. But you don't want the frames just solid white. You don't want them just jumping off of the wall. So that's why I'm making them a little more to the gray. So you can set your hand down here on the dry area below the mill and steady your hand a little bit. Don't try to paint this little stuff with your hand up in the air, because you can't steady yourself. A lot of times people use maul sticks. That's that, you know, a stick that rests across the top of the canvas and comes down, and then you can rest your hand on that. That's a nice thing to have in your paint box, so that you've got a way to steady your hand. And going back to this shadow up here, I think my angle's a little off on it. The shadow goes more straight down. So this is a way to clean up areas. See, I just took a little of the red barn color and come up here and just pulled it straight down, cutting off that little bit of shadow that was going in the wrong direction. So, you know, you always see little things that you have to go back and touch up. If you don't see those, you're really painting it perfect the first time, which that's something that most of us can't do. We have to go back and correct things. So never feel like that there's not any way to fix something. There's always a way to fix it. While we're working with the dark colors and the windows and so forth, let's go ahead and fill in all these dark openings down here. We've got a lot of dark. And your dark is going to be a mixture of your raw umber and Payne's gray. The reason I mix those colors so much is that Payne's gray by itself is a transparent color. Unless you get it on a little thick, you can see through it. And raw umber by itself is too brownish. But if I mix those two together, it makes just a nice dark value. It looks more black than anything. What we're going to do is come in with this really dark value, and we're going to paint these openings that's here. And you can see the top of the railing, and I'm going to go down to that little line there. So I'm going to sketch in that line so we don't lose that railing. You can go inside the mill, and this is like a big old porch-like thing there. So you can stand back in here and look over the fence to the water, so forth. But it's going to just look very dark and dense. And we'll come over to our posts. We won't lose our posts. And then we're going to come down to this next line. So again, I'm just kind of going over the tracing lines with my dark mixture, so I know where I'm going to go to. Come down to there. This will sharpen up the edge of your walls too, because the dark worked up against the red. Makes a nice sharp edge. And you don't want to paint out our big support posts either. All these posts are important. the second time I've painted this mill. I painted it years ago. In fact, it was the cover of one of my books. I don't remember which one right offhand. One that's long out of print. But I did it from a side view. It was a total different angle. I went around this other side of the building and took it from the flat side. You could see a little bit of the front. Just had a little bit of this side showing. But it made a real pretty painting on that side. And it was so many years ago I took that picture, and now then they've let trees and weeds and brush and stuff grow up around that other side. You can't even hardly see the mill. Really starts giving a lot of depth to the painting when we get these dark areas in here. I'm starting to get lots of contrast. And that makes it look really good, and the painting start to look much more finished. A little gravel bar down here in the front. The building's propped up on big pillars down here. It's going to hold it up, which is one of these things that we're going around with our dark. So you don't want to thin that dark too much. You can thin it a little bit, but if you thin it too much, it starts looking real transparent again. We don't want that. We want it to be solid dark. So we're just continuing on down. Now there's going to be a little rocky area down here. We'll just kind of paint our dark down to the bottom of the posts. And then we'll make it look like there's a little bit of rocks kind of going back into the shadows. We'll do that when we do our little bank down there. There's going to be, in this area, I'm right in through here, where that bush is going to be up above. I'm going to go ahead and carry the dark on across, because even though the bush is there, you can see in the picture there's going to be the open area here, and the bush just kind of trails some of its vines on down. So this needs to be all filled in. We're just going to fill the whole thing in. Okay, I'm still working on this dark here. We're just about to get all this blocked in. So and down in here, all these big openings. They're going to be dark, and we're just about to get them done. And then when we get up, so we get all of this in, and then we've got the door to do, and that's about the last one of the sections that's dark. This little roof up here is going to be a light blue. It looks like a little tin roof. There's going to be a little kind of a blue-white edge on the door. So I'm going to leave that you got a little double line mark there. We're just filling this door in, and then we'll have all of our base coating on this done, I think. Okay, that should finish up. I think we've got all the dark areas filled in now. Okay, let's come up here and paint this little roof. It looks like a little piece of tin right there. I want to use a little bit of blue-gray, so I'm going to go into my Payne's Gray and white, and maybe just a little touch of the blue also, the ultramarine blue. and go start right at the top of it that's a little bit darker up there, and pull it down and go follow the slope of the roof. And then as I come on down, I'm going to pick up a little bit of white. So it just lightens it up as you come on down. It can look a little streaky, like tin probably would look. And kind of right at the top, I'm going to pick up just a little line of Payne's Gray, make it a little darker right there. And down here at the bottom, I'm kind of come across the bottom, and then I sliced up a little tear in the bottom of it there. Just take the side of your brush and break out a little slice of the tin, make it look kind of raggedy. You could even put just a tiny little swipe of red on there just to get for a little rust. A little bigger Venetian red if you want to come back and just hit it. Just hit it and get out of it. Venetian red.
Way too blue.
Way too blue. If it gets too blue, all you have to do is just wipe your brush and take some straight white and put over it, and that should tone it down enough. And then these little posts back here are just kind of a blue-white. They're kind of a gray, actually, like these little edges here of the porch. They're more of a blue-gray. Payne's Gray with a little white, that's a kind of a blue-gray. And just use the chisel edge of your brush and those little posts, so I'm going to put this one in too. And then this piece right here at the bottom can go in, and it's kind of a blue-white. Enough white in there that you can see it. A little bit of medium when you're doing these little posts and all that stuff. A little bit of medium in there helps a lot. If you try to work it too dry, you're having hard times with it. The gray, little bit of extra white, maybe in a few places just for some highlights. And on this little bottom board there that's kind of wide, that one's wider. And there's a little bit of straight white on that too. Looks, it can either be a highlight or it could just be some chipped off paint or whatever. It's just, anyway, it's little thicker bits of white here and there. While I've got the blue-gray on the brush, I'm going to move it on over to these little railings over here, because it's kind of a blue-gray. They're not so much out in the bright sunshine, so you don't see it quite so bright. So they're Payne's Gray and white. If they go on and they look kind of fuzzy, you can come back in with your dark and kind of tidy them up a little bit. And the bottom railing is just up from the one that I haven't painted yet. I don't know if this is going to show up or not. is that bottom one's gonna be a little lighter, more on the tan side, and this one, if you can get it to, stick, is up just a little bit from that one that we haven't painted, and this one's blue-gray. Well, it's gonna be blue-gray by the time you drag it through the dark anyway. I might have to switch to my liner. That works much better, folks. The liner slides along without catching and making it where you couldn't see it. Like I said, you can tidy it up by taking your dark value and coming in under the line and kind of cleaning up your fuzzy edges. And the liner is working quite well for that too. So these little blue-gray areas here are your porch railings, and then you've got the little downward ones which are still blue-gray. They're just not quite as bright. And these little guys are going to go straight down. Just take your liner, just kind of space them out, and just put your little railings in so that everybody doesn't fall off the porch. People falling off the porch. You don't have to be real careful if they're not quite evenly spaced. Nobody's going to care. Like I said, if you need to neat these up or tidy them up just a little bit, take your liner, dip it in the Payne's gray, and then come in the dark area and clean up your edges, and it works good. If you keep trying to do it with the light color, you just keep smearing it around. So you have to clean up with dark. Okay, we're going to paint these big supports. That's going to be really the last thing on the building. And they're white, and I've got a little bit of raw sienna in the white, and maybe just a little touch of raw umber once in a while. So it's kind of a dirty white, kind of a tan color with little touches of dark once in a while. And so I'll just start on this outside post. As I'm painting the post, I'm probably going to find little ragged edges that, where I haven't put the background over quite close enough, but I'll just come back and fix that. I'll take a little dark and tidy up around the edge of my lines. And so as I come on down, we're just, again, using that. If you can get a variation of color, these are concrete, I think, is what they are. I know this big bottom piece here is more concrete, and the posts are the same color. They may be heavy logs or something. I don't recall from having been there, but anyway, they can be a little bit darker in some places, a little lighter in others, and that's going to give it some contrast. So that it's not important that it's all real smooth in one color. In fact, it's going to look better if it isn't. And I'm going to work just a little bit more raw umber over here on this shadowed side, which would be your right side. So just so you get a little variation of color. You can come back to it and pat in other colors too. If you get it worked in too smooth and want more textured, you can come back to it with a little more. The supports really flare out, so you'll have nice strong support. Bottom of these little supports are just a little bit curved because they're round, rather than make them real flat and straight on the bottom. They're a little curvy. I'm going to come back and put a little more white on the white side. Right now this is just kind of a dark brownish, tannish color. And here's this little other support floor thing that goes across, little floor right there. One little support I'm working on now is just a little bit different shaped. Didn't have the tall support. Try to get those on. I'm going to pat in just a little bit more white just for some highlights on mostly the left side there where the light's hitting it a little bit more. Again, I'll clean up any little fuzzies where they got outside the lines too much with a little bit extra Payne's Gray Raw Umber mixture, like a dark value under there. And that should be enough, I think. Okay, we've got our posts pretty well set in place and where they are. So now let's paint this bush that's right here next to the mill. And I'm going to use my small background brush to block it in with. So we're going to start with a dark green. You can use some blue. You can put a little bit of Viridian in it. We haven't been using that Viridian much. And maybe a touch of Payne's Gray. And anyway, it'll look just dark, like we've been starting with dark values. And tap with the corner of the brush, kind of just a little tap so you get some irregular shapes out there against the building. This is, again, this is Payne's gray, ultramarine blue. You can have a little touch of viridian in it, just something that's dark. Come on over. I'm going to come over yay far. You know how far yay far is. Kind of sort of toward the middle. And I might not even have that dark all the way across. If you put it all the way across already, it really doesn't matter that much. But somewhere along in the middle there, I'm going to stop and pick up some yellow and blue. So you've got a mid-tone green. And then your yellow and blue is kind of next to a mid-tone green. Remember, we're not pounding this color in. A light touch gets you where you want to go more than a lot of pressure. Keep it lighter. A touch lighter. Let it come back over the dark a bit, so you're losing some of that flat dark look. And then as you come out toward the light on the left, I'm picking up more yellow-white. Remember, the more yellow and more white you put in the green, the lighter it looks, which makes sense. And then again, a light touch, and this little bush comes out past the wall. Try to make it look kind of loose and airy out there, so it's not real heavy paint at all. And your light will tap back into the dark too. Now you might have to do this. If you'll look at mine up here, I've got my lights coming on out, but it's kind of running into a lot of light that's back behind. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of Payne's gray or anything dark on my brush, and I'm switching to a little detail flat here. And I'm going to darken the background trees just a little bit where this bush comes out over them, so we get maximum contrast. I could even tap a few little light green leaves on with this smaller brush. Would be fine. Come on back into the bush enough that you don't want any part of the bush just looking completely one flat color. So I'm going to tap a little bit of lighter green on back into the dark too, just again for contrast. Still see some of the dark. You could also do this bush little foliage shapes with your fan brush if you'd rather. There's a lot of different brushes you can use. You don't have to use one certain brush all the time. I'm getting this little bush kind of tall up here. He's growing, and even a little bit of him comes over that little lower window even. And then it comes down and just got some little falling down kind of leaves that come down over that dark opening. Flip-flop the brush around as you tap. And there's your bush. Just be sure you've got enough light out there on that outside edge. I'm going to take just a little bit of that light yellow with my fan brush corner and tap a little bit in with that. That gives it a nice soft look too. Now see, the bush will pop away from your background as long as you've made enough contrast there. Okay, so now we're going to move over here and paint our gravel bar. So it has to have a base coat on it first, and the base coat could look a little choppy because the more choppy you make it, the more gravelly it's going to look. I'm going to use some raw sienna with a little touch of white. The white can be kind of dirty white, it doesn't have to be light. And I'm going to put a little dark on the other side with some raw umber. See, I've got some raw umber on one side, and this side has the, I don't know if you can see it or not, it's got the light color. It's got the raw sienna and white. So when I come in like this, I get a little dark coming off the back side, and I'm going to get just a little more light on the other side. And then you get a little bit of the light coming off the other side, and I'm just doing it with little scooty strokes, strokes. And I'm just basing it in, but because I'm kind of going a little choppy kind of stroke texture, you get a little bit of light and dark on there at the same time. It just kind of, we'll come back and put some more highlights on it as well, but and back here at the back, we want this to look like it fades back into the shadows, because there's not a straight line there. So if you kind of come up into the dark just a little bit, you might have to do that with a smaller brush, kind of small in between those posts. But if you just kind of chop a little bit of light on back into the shadows, let it just fade away, it looks like you could walk back in under there. If you leave it as a hard line, it doesn't look so open, because all that's open and under there. So this little brush kind of works maybe better than the big one for that. And then just let those colors fade out. And then coming back over toward the edge of the canvas, I'm going to go back to the bigger brush. And just a little bit more raw umber in it here. Get a little darker back over to the side. Keep your little strokes kind of scooting back and forth. And then again, I'm picking up a little raw sienna and white and turning it so that paint's on the top. Just chop in some little bits of texture back there, so it just kind of fades back into toward the shadows on the grass. Probably a little bit more dark all along the bottom edge of this little gravel bar is going to be good. That will kind of lift it up away from the water. I'm going to come back with my detail brush and still a little bit of white and touch of raw sienna, and just little short kind of patty strokes. Don't push hard, just a little light touch, and try to create some texture that looks kind of rocky, or just lights and darks. Makes it look like you've got stones or gravels or something on there. Right under the posts, I'm going to add just a little bit of a dark line, just right under the post. That makes them look set down. Just a little raw umber. Kind of do a little kind of circular line there under the post, just a little bit of a curve. Not too big of a smile. And that's your gravel bar. That's probably good enough. As long as you've got enough light and dark on there, see, it's going to look like little gravelly things. Okay, I'm going to paint the water next, and I'm going to use my background brush again. This is a big area of water, so the bigger your brush is, the easier it is to work and the little quicker it's going to go. We're going to start out with some dark values up here, and everything you put in, other than I'll probably draw a little line around the bank, but beyond that, everything you put in is going to go in with downward strokes. And we're going to start with a dark blue up here. This is going to be white, a little bit of white, not much. Payne's gray, ultramarine blue, maybe just a little bit of white. We'll put it in going down and kind of pull it down irregular. We'll pick up a little bit of the red from the mill, kind of put a little bit of that in there. You could have some greens in the water. As you move over into this area to the left, it's going to be more of the blue-grays, ultramarine blue, Payne's gray, and white, and in through here. So we'll do a little bit at a time, but just remember, nothing is going to go across until we get all this pulled down, and then we'll distort it going across very, very lightly. We'll distort it, not pushing. Okay, I'm picking up Payne's gray, a little ultramarine blue, maybe just a little touch of medium, not too much. And maybe a little bit of raw umber right under the bank, because this is going to be dark. And to start, I'm just going to scoot a little bit of a dark line right underneath your bank. And then I'm taking the flat of the brush. Sometimes I'm on the flat, sometimes I turn it sideways, but mostly it's flat. And we're starting to pull down, and I do use some medium, a little bit, because, you know, don't get carried away with it, but enough to make your paint move a little bit. If your water looks too blue, get a little bit more Payne's gray and not quite as much of your ultramarine blue, but some of that blue is pretty in there. And so you just kind of brush mixing this. I'm pulling it down a bit. A little raw umber will dull the color. So if you want a little bit of raw umber in there, that's fine. You can have a little touch of iridium in there too. That's pretty. Some of your dark colors. So I'm trying to cover the canvas as I go. Sometimes I flip the brush sideways and sometimes I keep it straight. I'm going to put just a little bit of green in there. I'm going to go over here with just a little bit of green, like you're reflecting some of your tree colors. This easel's kind of rattly. Keep your strokes going down. Back into the blue and Payne's gray, and I'm going to add just a little bit of white. And get down here where I'm going to start to put in a little red in a minute, but while the blue is on the brush, I'm going to go ahead and come back under the building, right there, or next to the building it is. Somewhere along in here, I'm going to wipe the brush just a little bit and pick up some Venetian red and a little of the raw sienna. And see, that I'll lay that in, and then I'm going to overlap into the blue. Every color you put in has to blend in with whatever is around it. In here, see, as long as I've got some red up there in the above my water, I can put some in the water. Once you get past the building over here, you don't want to see any more red in the water way over here, because it wouldn't be reflecting over there on your left side. Right under that bush, I might pick up just a little bit of green and come down with some green that would reflect from the bush. You can put most any colors in your water as long as they're in the vicinity of where you're painting. Down here toward the bottom, if you don't want to put a whole lot more red in there, go back in with your blue. Keep your strokes going straight down. Don't start leaning them off to the side. They'll look kind of odd. keep enough paint on there that you're working along with painting the brush. We don't want to get too skimpy. Just enough to, cover the canvas nicely. Every time you do your water, it's going to look a little different because you pick the colors up a little different, but it's okay. That's part of the fun. And as I come over toward this left side, I'm going to start picking up more Payne's Gray and little blue. Just put it on fearlessly. Fearlessly. Way up here next to the dam, it's going to be kind of dark water. Get plenty of paint in your brush so you're not having to struggle to get something off your brush. It's better to paint with paint in the brush. A lot of times I can hear people's brush strokes and they're going scritchy, scratchy, scritchy, scratchy, scritchy, scratchy, and I know they're not using enough paint. Not that I was hearing it at the moment. A little bit of lighter blue. See, your colors can vary. Water has so much different color in it, especially when you're reflecting colors from all around it. Water is clear. Water of itself has no color, but it's going to reflect the colors that's around it. You want it a little bit dark up here under the water, under the dam. When the waterfall falls over, those little splashes are going to look prettier if they're against a fairly dark value of water. So get some dark up there, dark blue, gray and blue. Red down here maybe. And when you get your water covered like this, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my fan brush. Okay, as I come on across, keep coming on with downward strokes. Over in here, maybe just a little bit more white. So we want to get something that's going to show some movement. If your water is too much all one color or too much all dark and or all light, you've got to get your contrasts in there. So when we go across, it's got something to distort into. Might be enough to start. When you're ready to go across, part of the time I use the fan flat and go back and forth, but actually probably a little more, I would turn it on the side, so I'm pulling more of a narrow line, and it distorts your downward lines. That's what we're wanting it to do, is just get that little distortion so it looks like the water's moving across these downward reflections. So you're pulling it across. And then once we get up in here, soften the edge of the ground, blur it a little so you don't have that real sharp line there. And then under these posts, if you would want to reflect a little bit of the posts, you can take some of that light white with that bit of raw sienna and just kind of pull down some of the general colors that's on the post with the corner of your fan brush. And right there was a little white post back there. I'll just pull some of it right down into the water. And under the bush, it's gonna be maybe some green, but by the time we get our water coming over there, that's gonna be all foamy, so I'm not gonna worry about that. And then again, just lightly back and forth, get these little distortion lines coming across your reflection. And then you can pick up a little bit of white and still come in with more movement lines. Now this is leaving just a little bit of a mark of white going across, you know, to get some little ripples in there. And it just kind of goes back and forth. Some of them can be a little bit bolder, a little whiter than others. Just movement lines. After we get the waterfall in, we'll have a little bit more splashing going on here and then some more movement. So I'm going to stop my lines right there so I don't get too many. And then we're going to talk about our waterfall. Okay, for the falls, I'm going to use my fan brush, and I'm going to clean my brush. My brush has got a lot of different colors in it, so I'm just kind of wiping it off. Dip it in turp and wipe it off. Okay, what we're going to do first is lay a little bit of white right here in this little area that we left for it. As I said before, the top of the waterfall, the top of the dam, is about eye level, so we don't see any of the water that's back over there. We just kind of see the edge of it as it's coming over the dam. So there's a little white. And now, this is going to be white. I'm going to start with white with just a little touch of blue in it, just a tiny bit of blue. Not a real heavy blue, but just a little. And I'm going to use about half of the brush. Don't paint in the center of your fan brush because it's too wide and it kind of makes a weird stroke, funny stroke. We don't like it so much. So I'm using just maybe a little half of the brush, corner of the brush. And I'm going to start up here, and then I'm just slightly curving it and dropping it over. And I've left some dark areas in between. The waterfall isn't coming over heavy all across. I want it to look more like it's kind of breaks, and you can see some of the dark of the dam behind it, or through it. So you're starting up here and then come over the edge, pull it over the edge, and then just kind of pull it down lightly. Don't push. People tend to be heavy-handed a lot of times and they push when you need to have more paint on the brush and then use a light touch. Now this isn't got a big curve, it's just a little bit of a curve. And down here there's probably less curve as you come closer to you. So that's blue-white, and then you can pick up just a little bit of whiter white and just touch a little bit of brighter sparkles in there. Don't thin the paint. Let it just come on down without being thinned. If it's too wet, it's going to lift up a lot of the base coat on you. So again, I'm pulling a little bit of whiter white over. And then when you get to the bottom, it's going to splash. And I've got a little corner of the brush and it's going to splash right at the corner, or right at the bottom, I should say, right at the bottom of the falls, and then it just barely pulls out a bit. I'm just kind of using the bottom corner of the brush for the splashes. Corner of the brush, corner of the brush, corner of the brush. And then again, take your fan brush and pull some of the little movement lines on out. Or you can come in with a flat brush and do a little of that. You can come in with like a little detail flat maybe and move some little streaks out onto the top of the water. Not yet. Okay, I'm just about done with everything, so you want to look your painting over and see if there's little detail things that you might want to touch up on. One thing that we didn't do on today's, and I didn't talk about it, but if you don't have enough board lines in your building, some people get enough in as they get it in and some don't. You could wait till this kind of tacks up just a little. It's probably dry enough now, and add just a few little Venetian red lines cutting across. This is entirely optional, and if, like I said, if you had a lot of nice little streaks already in there, you don't need any more. But you could add these, and this is, like I said, you can put it in or not. But right here, there's a little shadow that I missed. So I'm going to take just a little touch of Payne's Gray and come in next to the door, next to that little door post, and just kind of very light touch, just pull a little shadow out there. Just like that. And while the Payne's Gray is in my brush, I'm going to add just a little bit more dark down on these little white boards, I guess they are, right in through there. They look just a little bright when I step back and look, so I'm going to tone them down just a little. And put a little gray and browns in there where it's not quite so prominent. Okay, and then you, again, just look it over, see if there's any more little water lines or anything that you'd like to do that, you know, you feel like would add to the painting. And you can set it up and look at it for several days and go back and see little things that you want to touch up. I do that all the time. But anyway, I think this one's probably done. I'm going to take my liner, get a little bit of the red and sign it down here at the bottom. And thank you for watching me paint this red mill. I hope you enjoyed it and hope yours turns out beautiful. See you later. Bye-bye.